ahead.
Thanks, everyone. The High Court has provisionally allowed permission to appeal in relation to the First Amendment and Article 10, which is freedom of expression. The point relating to nationality, so the fact that the United States is going to discriminate against Julian and say that he is not protected by the First Amendment due to his nationality, being Australian. And thirdly, in relation to the death penalty, because the United States is able to change the charges once he's in the United States to charges that carry the death penalty. So these are the three issues that the United States has identified as posing a major challenge to extraditing Julian. Of course, the case should have just been thrown out, and Julian should not have spent a single day in prison. The United States is bringing a case based on a persecution of a journalist for his political opinions. He expresses his political opinions through his publishing work, and rather than ask for a political intervention from the US government, the British courts should just have thrown out this case because it criminalizes journalism. And that is the takeaway here, really, when you're looking at the decision today, that they have gone to the heart of it, and it is Article 10, the First Amendment, freedom of expression, that is at issue. And the British courts are really tying themselves in knots. And giving the United States yet another opportunity to make a political, not a legal intervention, a political intervention, because the case that they have been bringing for the past 5 years, or 13 years, depending on where you start counting, is one that attacks the freedom to publish the truth. And so the courts are asking for an assurance that actually contradicts the case that the United States has been bringing. And the United States government, let's be clear, if it's a diplomatic assurance, it's a political assurance. And we've seen it already in the past. US assurances are not worth the paper that they are written on. The United States, of course, is a country that has plotted to assassinate and kidnap Julian, a publisher, in order to silence him. The United States, under CIA Director Mike Pompeo, discussed at the highest levels of the administration in the White House plans to assassinate and kidnap Julian. This case comes about as a result of those discussions. The United States and the CIA were hatching plans. Mike Pompeo told his workers at the CIA in Langley to elaborate plans about how to go about killing Julian. And then, only after that, the DOJ charged Julian. And this was all under the Trump administration. And as you all know, this all relates to publications from 2010 and 2011 under the Obama administration. And the Obama administration looked at this case and said, we will not take a case against Julian Assange in relation to the Chelsea Manning publications because he is a publisher. He is not a hacker, he is a publisher, and it is impossible to distinguish what WikiLeaks did publishing this material from what the New York Times did in relation to this material, and from what the New York Times does every single day. You know full well that that national defense information is published on a daily basis in every broadsheet, in every country, or in every country where there is a free press, every single day. So what this case is an unprecedented case in which the Espionage Act is being repurposed in order to criminalize what the New York Times does every single day, and that has not changed. The New York Times problem, what Obama called the New York Times problem, remains. And what Julian's case is an acceptance of the New York Times problem and an inversion of the New York Times problem. They've turned it into the New York Times solution, an ability to be able to take criminal prosecution against the New York Times for publishing the truth. That is what this case means, and that is what the United States is pursuing. The United States should not issue assurances. They should just drop the case, because this case, as the Obama administration rightly identified, is an attack on all of you, on the press, on freedom of conscience, and on the public's right to know. And we all know at this crucial moment that we find ourselves in, with the conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine, that the press needs to be able to be free to publish the truth about what happens in conflict and war. And those who are involved in driving war should not be given the power to be able to silence and imprison the journalists who are engaged in exposing war crimes. Thank you.
What is deeply worrying, reading through the decision from the court today, is the fact that Julian Assange is not allowed to present evidence in appeal court about the plot to kidnap or assassinate him. I think that's absurd. There is not enough evidence, they say. Well, there has been a deeply investigative journalistic piece by Yahoo News based on more than 30 sources. It has not been denied. On the contrary, in essence, it has been confirmed by Mike Pompeo, then CIA director when these plans were drawn up, when he stated that the leakers should be hunted and they should be charged for leaking this information. You cannot go after somebody for leaking information that isn't truthful, can you? So it's absurd that he is not allowed to present that as an argument against that extradition in a courtroom here. It is also absurd in my mind that Julian is not allowed to argue in court that his extradition would violate the UK-US extradition treaty, which specifically prohibits extradition for political offences. And the judge is here to say that actually the treaty doesn't mean anything. It's in black and white. It should be of concern to everybody. The treaty obligation is null and void. However, the information that the opportunity that is now given to the United States, as Stella said, to once again amend their case with the so-called assurances, a political intervention, is a charade. But by giving them the opportunity to make assurances that he will be treated as a journalist with First Amendment protection, as a US journalist, and not be discriminated against as an Australian citizen, blows a huge hole in the entire argument of the United States, who have been going on year after year after year saying that he is not a journalist and that he does not have First Amendment protection in the United States. So what is left? The judges here are basically saying, give us assurances that he is treated as a journalist, whilst the entire time, and the entire case has been based on their argument that he is not. So at least today we got an acceptance, de facto, of the journalistic aspect of the work that Julian did, which everybody understands and knows. So this is just a continuation. It should not have happened. Basically, in their own writing, the judge had arguments to allow the appeal. The arguments are all there. Why continue this charade, this lawfare against Julian? In 2 weeks, he will have spent 5 years in Belmarsh prison. 5 years. And we still haven't come to a conclusion in this case. The onus is now on the United States government. That's where you should be going and ask them, you should drop the case because there's nothing left in it after today's verdict by the judges. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jen Robinson. I'm a barrister here at Doughty Street Chambers and counsel to Julian Assange and to WikiLeaks. The court's decision today demonstrates just how flawed the US extradition request is. We are 5 years into this process now, 5 years in which Julian Assange has been in prison here in the UK without conviction, on remand, in relation to an extradition request that should never have been brought, and that we've seen today from the court's decision raises fundamental concerns about free speech, the First Amendment, and the risk that a journalist and publisher could be subjected to the death penalty. That the US is being asked 5 years after seeking this extradition request to provide these diplomatic assurances to remedy what we say are these fatal flaws in the US case goes to show just how problematic this request is. The judgment today demonstrates that if Julian was extradited to the United States, there is a very real risk and concern that he will not be afforded free speech protections. This is a dangerous precedent. It means that any journalist and publisher who is outside of the United States publishing truthful information about the United States but is not a United States citizen will not benefit from the First Amendment, and that should be concerning for every single journalist in this room and every single journalist watching. We are, of course, concerned too that the facts as pleaded in the US indictment could expose Julian to the death penalty. It is absurd that we are 5 years into this case and the US has not offered an assurance to protect him from that risk. Now, the judge's decision, of course, is that we've got provisional permission to appeal on 3 grounds. On the fact that he would not be permitted to rely on the First Amendment, the risk that he'd be exposed to the death penalty, and the risk that he'll be discriminated against on the grounds that he's Australian. The court has called for what they want, satisfactory assurances to protect him against that. We say there's no such satisfactory assurance. Amnesty International says that their US diplomatic assurances are not worth the paper they're written on. In a case as serious as this, involving the death penalty and involving free speech protections for all journalists everywhere, this is clearly insufficient. This is a case that should never have been brought. It was brought by the Trump administration, which describes the press as the enemy of the people. It is an indictment that the New York Times and Washington Post has said criminalises public interest journalism. And this is an Australian journalist, an award-winning Australian journalist and publisher who has been 5 years in a high-security prison because of this extradition request. We say the US government should not be offering an assurance in response to this judgment. They should be dropping the case, and it is a case that should never have been brought in the first place. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Vincent. I'm the Director of Campaigns for Reporters Without Borders, Reporters Sans Frontières. We campaign for the release of Julian Assange as a top global priority because of the implications his case has for global journalism and press freedom. We've monitored these entire 4 years of extradition proceedings in court, and it's been long and convoluted. And what's come out today is also convoluted. We want to retain some hope, though. There is a sliver of hope here that there could still be some form of justice possible in the UK courts. We are dismayed that it has come this far, but there is still a chance for the UK to act in the interest of journalism and press freedom and prevent Julian Assange's extradition to the United States. We're concerned by this repeated reliance on diplomatic assurances throughout these legal proceedings, which really underscores again the political nature of this case, and it shouldn't be decided on diplomatic assurances. Even if these assurances are respected in practice, and again, there's no guarantee that they will be, we have serious concerns about the very charges against Julian Assange, which have nothing to do with these diplomatic assurances, noting that the Espionage Act itself lacks a public interest defence. So even if all of these conditions are met, we don't believe that Julian Assange or anybody accused in this way could have a fair trial. He cannot defend the nature of his actions as being in the public interest. At Reporters Without Borders, we believe that the publication of these leaked documents was in the public interest. These documents exposed information that we have the right to know, war crimes and human rights abuses, which has never been prosecuted. This informed public interest reporting around the world, and it is crucial to journalistic practice to be able to operate in this way. So what happens to Julian Assange has implications not just for him, but for journalists, for media organizations everywhere. And we call again Whether this progresses further in the UK courts beyond this question of assurances, it remains in the power of the US government to bring this to a close now. We call again on the Biden administration to put an end to this 13-year persecution and prosecution of Julian Assange and act at this late stage to protect journalism and press freedom. We call again to free Assange.
Thank you. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. I remind you, if you could introduce yourself and your name and who you're writing for or broadcasting for, and then proceed to ask a question.
I'm Claire Lasco. I'm working on a documentary on the Julian Assange case for YouTube Directly. I'd like to ask Stella, if you wouldn't mind, if somebody is kicking this case down the can down the road, who is doing it?
Let's not for me to speculate. What's clear is that this case is extremely controversial in the United States. It has always been controversial. During the Obama administration, of course, they decided not to prosecute Julian over the Chelsea Manning publications. And during the Trump administration, 2 of the prosecutors who were working on this case were reassigned after the Espionage Act charges were brought. They were taken off the case because they disagreed. And we know that this conflict has been at the heart of each and every administration, because within each and every administration there is an awareness that this is a very dangerous case, and this case, in fact, can be the end of the First Amendment. There are, of course, people like Mike Pompeo who want Julian dead. And that is why Julian will never be safe in the United States, no matter what. It is unprecedented that you have a case in which you have reports that have never been contradicted by the CIA or Mike Pompeo, and in fact confirmed effectively by Mike Pompeo when he said that the sources for the story about the kidnap-kill plot against Julian should be prosecuted under the Espionage Act, not for libel, but for disclosing state secrets. So there's no denial that the United States has engaged in a murder conspiracy against Julian. So there are different interests at play. There are different actors at play. Ultimately, those who do not want to see information that is embarrassing to the administration, they see a utility in having Julian imprisoned, because not only is there an attack on whistleblowers, there's an attack now on journalists as well. If you have whistleblowers unwilling to, whistleblowers knowing that they will be prosecuted under the Espionage Act, and now also publishers and journalists, then people will be too afraid to leak, and they will also be too afraid to publish. That is what the purpose of it is. So I see it as 3 levels. I see the prosecution against Julian on 3 levels. One is to silence Julian and punish him for his political opinions, to stop him from embarrassing the powerful. The second is to intimidate the rest of the press, to send a signal, to use him as a deterrent, to make sure that no one else will. And the third is to keep the public ignorant, because that's the effect of the first 2. If you don't have anyone willing or able to publish the truth anymore, then the public can be manipulated, and that's the ultimate goal.
Hi, this is for Stella as well, sorry. Bruce Stane from BBC News. Could you give us an idea of what your initial reaction was to when you got the judgment this morning? And also, has there been any reaction from Julian at all? And how is he? What's the latest on his situation? How's he doing?
Well, I can only speak about my own reaction. I find the judgment utterly bizarre. As I said before, my impression is that the court is tying itself in knots to find basically passing the buck to the US government. And inviting it to contradict its own case in order to wave through his extradition. But this is par for the course in this case. Bizarre decisions by the courts, unpredictable legal proceedings, exceptions. It's a political case, and this is what you come to expect when you have a political case. It's political on every level. The publications were political, exposing what was happening during the wars by the occupying forces, the cover-ups, the torture, the assassination squads, the lack of accountability, the political nature of the offences. The Espionage Act, prohibited under Article 4 of the UK-US extradition treaty, barred from extradition, and yet the courts have said it's fine. You can extradite him because the treaty is not enforceable domestically. There is no protection for the individual even when there are political offences brought in the extradition. That's the decision. The political motivation of the Trump administration in bringing this case, and the Biden administration for keeping it going, to be able to bring criminal prosecution against a publisher for publishing the truth. And the purpose to punish his political opinions. In fact, the Obama administration from the very beginning said that WikiLeaks and Julian opposed the Afghan war and therefore was not they were trying to persuade the rest of the press to not amplify WikiLeaks because Julian had the opinion that the Afghan war was wrong. So he's being punished for his political opinions, and the whole case is an attack on public interest journalism, and public interest journalism that conflicts with the interests of those who want to drive and continue wars.
Catherine Booth from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, one from UGen. What do you think are the chances of the US actually abiding by this and giving the assurances?
I can't speculate on whether the US will offer these assurances or what they'll do with them, but what we do know is that on the basis of numerous documented cases and Amnesty International's own position that the US diplomatic assurances, we say, aren't worth the paper they're written on. It is very concerning that the court would invite assurances on matters of this seriousness in a case involving a journalist and a publisher. And as we've said, the US government should not be offering assurances, they should be dropping the case altogether. And that's the only satisfactory outcome.
So you can't give any assurances that they'll follow through even if they do say that they'll do it?
Even if we receive the assurances, we're not confident that we could rely on them.
Michael Holt from Reuters. Wall Street Journal had a report last week saying there have been preliminary discussions over a potential plea deal. Are you able to say if there have been any initial discussions over a possible deal? And if there were or weren't, would a plea deal be something that you would consider, because this might bring the whole matter to a conclusion without the need for extradition?
Is that for me? Well, in relation to that Wall Street Journal piece, I'd refer you to Barry Pollack's statement. That's Julian's U.S. Defense Counsel. Your question should really be posed to the Department of Justice. But now, with this decision, I think the correct question is, why don't you drop the case? Julian has been in prison for almost 5 years. This case serves no purpose other than to intimidate journalists all around the world, not just here, not just in the United States. It is sending a chilling effect. It is creating not just a legal precedent, but a political precedent that is putting journalists all over the world at risk, because it is setting a new normal.
Okay, thank you very much. There will be opportunity for short one-to-one interviews after this. If you're interested in that, please come up and speak to me, and I will try to funnel it as best I can. But thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
I've got to